So we're focusing on the long range meta, and I've already built out the weapons so you can kind of just skim through them and see what they overall look like. And the main things we're trying to solve for are bullet velocity, recoil control, or stabilization along those lines, so that we're able to hit targets at significant ranges. So even if we want to hit a target incredibly far, that's really what we're going for. Some will be a little bit slower than others, and then some will have bigger mags, faster fire rates, and there's going to be preference that goes along with it. This is going to be the M4 build that I have, and you kind of see how that builds out right there. Especially the change to the buy station where they're only 2,500. You can pretty much get both of your weapons for 5,000, and then go out of your way to do a stronghold or wait for the loadout to drop so you can get your perks. So you can kind of factor in that you're already going to buy a gun and have all your loadouts built out. The M13 is also another good option. Really fast fire rate like we saw in Verdansk and Caldera, and super easy to control. But it suffers the same fate where it doesn't do a ton of damage, so you're going to need a lot of shots to hit. Even though it has a relatively good TTK, you're going to get stuck with situations where it would have been better if it had an 80 round mag. So you can kind of see how the attachments stack out there, because this one up close doesn't kill all that quick. So it's primarily a long range option where you're combining this with an SMG or something else that you're going to be using for up close. LMGs tend to perform exceptionally well just because they're not really a lot of recoil in the game. You get a little bit larger mags so you can take on multiple people. So it kind of just balances out. The reason why I'm not necessarily a big fan of the Icarus is because it's kind of like an M4, but with the slower reload. So I might as well go with an M4. Again, that's going to be preference depending on what you have unlocked. You can actually use the attachment that you would use for a magazine. You put that towards bullet velocity so those bullets are instantly hitting. HCR is an interesting one. It has almost no recoil, but it also does very little damage. So it doesn't really feel like it hits hard, but it's super easy to kind of stay on target, hit your target. And like I said, with the LMGs, they are a little bit slower. This one doesn't really get the advantage that we're seeing with a huge mag, but you are starting off with a base 60 round mag. You could go larger if you wanted to go that route. Instead of getting the aim down sight, you could just get rid of that, and then you can go ahead and put on like a 100 round mag or something like that to kind of offset that. But again, it's going to be preference. One of the main reasons I'm using the mono on a lot of these, because this is a suppressor with recoil control, and there's very few of them that actually have recoil control. We got the Zulu, which you're going to see I use on some other builds, but overall there's not a lot of these suppressors that have recoil control, which is kind of what we're looking to solve for these infinite range builds, where we're kind of just going for the longest range possible. Brings us to the RAAL, which is probably one of the hardest hitting in the entire game, but it's pretty slow. We can kind of see how it balances out there. You can use the Talon that we see on here, recoil control. That's what we're solving for. There are other attachments, but it doesn't have the exact same attachments. So we're rocking with an equivalent. That's kind of what we're looking for when we're building out weapons. And this one, you'll see it is kind of slow, but same thing. We're not going to be missing a ton of shots. And this thing hits pretty, it actually has less recoil than I expected. So I was adjusting more than that's how you know the gun's so low recoil. Is like, yeah, you don't even gotta adjust, dog. You just line it up and there it is. So I was over adjusting for recoil, but there you go. Very low recoil, almost no recoil, and you just gotta kind of get on target and you're good to go. That's gonna bring us to the TAC B, and this one I think is a little bit more of a higher skill weapon. It doesn't have quite the mag size of the TAC 56, which we'll get into. It is a little bit slower fire rate, you know, like we're seeing, but it's more of, I think, would be a higher skill, higher hard hitting weapon. And if you're more of like a fan of just mixing it up and you don't want to use, you know, the same old stuff, this is one that is good, but it's a little bit harder to use even with a low recoil build. And that brings us to the Signal, which is pretty much the only sniper that makes it in here. There is another, like there's one or two more snipers that are worth using. But the reason why the Signal does so well is because it has a fast fire rate. Most of the time when you're doing a sniper, it's not going to one-shot hit. So unless you and your partners are going, hey, let's 1, 2, 3 snipe, and to get that one shot down essentially, to throw the person off, you're really not going to get that. So this one, what helps is you're able to get the fire rate and get 2 shots off. You're planning for a 2-shot kill, very reasonable range, not a ton of recoil, where you're going to be able to manage that and you'll be able to hit those shots rather easily. Brings us to the Kastov 7.62, and this is by far one of my favorite weapons to use. This is probably my main go-to in DMZ because its TTK is so broken fast. The only downside is it only has a 40 round mag. I wish it had a 50 or a 60 or a 45 even. That would take it over the top. I normally use like for some of my closer range builds, if I don't want to use it ultimate long range, I would go with the Cronin Mini Pro. That's kind of the one I mainly go with. If I want to go with what I'm going with now, which is the AIM Op, that's kind of been more popularized recently. And the one that I like is the Vortex. It has the green dot. Obviously, the tuning would be a little different, but it gives you a little bit extra zoom. And you can kind of see how the green dot is versus a red dot. And then I have it set up with this particular build, which is the main one I'm using. So obviously, if you have a preference of different optics or you haven't unlocked other ones yet, more power to you to use whatever's going to make the most sense for you. That brings us to TAC 56. I think this is the one that a lot of people tend to lean towards just because it's very easy to use. Some people are even going iron sights, and then instead of putting on an optic, they use a rear grip, so they're focusing on more medium range engagements or closer, and then they use an SMG for close range to handle those situations. This one I like. I've been using the Kastov 7.62 so long, I notice how hard this one doesn't hit compared to that, but this one kind of offsets it by having a 60 round mag versus the 40, and it's still relatively easy to shoot. You know, if you want to hit your targets, if you want to go without an optic, like I said, you could definitely do that, and then put on a rear grip with control, and then you kind of go that route. Or even do a laser for aim down sight. And you don't really want to go with the barrel because they don't help your recoil control. So you kind of avoids that completely and allows you to kind of build it out with that. And then last but not least, everyone's used this gun or seen this gun. This was my #1 gun that I had when I did my top loadouts before Warzone 2 drop. And it's kind of carried over. And the reason it does so well is because it has the 75 round mag that the 7.62 doesn't have, and because of that, it allows it to be a little bit more versatile. It is a mag reload essentially, even though it's a drum. It reloads faster than we're seeing with like the RAAL or the Icarus, which kind of hold those guns back. So it kind of does a little bit of everything. You don't need to use that attachment, so you can get extra bullet velocity if you want to go ahead and shoot straight. And this one, again, it doesn't have hardly any recoil. Great bullet velocity, good reload time compared to other LMGs. So you're able to stay into the action. You get a free attachment because of it. You get great bullet velocity if you want. So like one of those jack of all trade long range guns. I expect it to get nerfed at some point. They said, somebody told me there's a blueprint coming. So I don't expect a nerf on this thing until they've sold a bunch of those, but we'll see how that goes. Appreciate all the support. Thank you for watching as always. Have a great day.